start, I request, if you're not speaking, just to be on the mute. So today we'll take up this energy and utility sector. As we know that, energy utility sector is a very large sector for the global economy itself. In fact, from the perspective of, the energy sector, which is the oil and gas, before the likes of Walmart came in, and I think except for Walmart, if you go beyond Walmart, which is at $500 billion sort of revenue, maybe next 5-6 companies will be your ExxonMobil or Total, or those are the oil companies. So it's a very large part of our economy, the oil and gas, and so is the utility sector, right, which is primarily electricity and water. There are many other utilities. In a broad term, you can say anything which provides a utilitarian value to us, which includes even public transport, is a utility. But when you talk of energy and utility sector, we essentially talk of water and electricity. This is, as we'll discuss, my sense is that it is at this point of time, it's a very mixed bag from the COVID perspective. There are certain things which are obviously bad because the whole economy is suffering, and both these sectors are not outside it. There is a fall in demand. As we know, the oil demand has dramatically fallen. So has electricity demand has fallen because industries are not running. But at the same time, we have seen certain positives, like the oil prices have come down, which is good for certain countries like India or China, but definitely bad for certain countries like Middle East or Russia. And the one thing which has happened and which has actually made a lot of people happy during COVID is the environment has become very, very clean, right? We every day see this notes that somebody is able to see Kanchenjunga or some other mountain peak from 200 kilometers, 500 kilometers, essentially because, in a way, ironically, oil and gas sector is not doing so well. People are not consuming much of oil and gas, and obviously that impact is clearing up the environment. Now, just one sec. Now, before we get into the sector per se, I thought whatever I have been saying, I'll just reproduce it in the next slide, where I have defined this energy sector. Energy sector is in a broad sense. There are many probably other components of energy. For example, if you burn wood, or if you burn even dried leaves, that is also what produces energy. But when you talk of energy sector, it has two parts. One is the crude oil and its derivatives, like petroleum, air turbo fuel, diesel, gasoline, kerosene, which comes out of crude oil, and natural gas, right? And the utility sector is electricity, which has again various sources: thermal power, hydropower, solar, wind, nuclear power. Solar and wind are called renewable, and nuclear is of course a class by its own. Today's context, probably one sector which is not at all affected, at least from the production perspective, but then it's a very small component. And of course, water is a utility, especially when it gets supplied to individual houses through the municipality. On the right side, I have put two broad definitions of how these segments are, how these sectors are divided. So if you look at oil and gas, both actually, there are three parts. There is a upstream, there is a midstream, and there is a downstream. So broadly, when you extract it, from whatever source, and normally it is obviously below the ground, whether it is gas or whether it is oil. There are some other sources, of course, which necessarily not below the ground, like we have, the shale gas, which you talk about, which is near the seashore, but normally below the ground. That is called the upstream. Okay, so you dig the oil wells and you extract. So if you look at The companies which does it in Indian context will be ONGC, Oil and Natural Gas Commission, and Oil India Limited. So they are into extraction. Then you have the midstream, where you bring the crude from whatever you have got from below the ground, and it can be of various varieties. It can be high quality, low quality. Some of this, like if you go, Oil India production in India, which is primarily from the northeastern part of the country, the quality of the crude is very good. So whatever you extract out of it, you get much higher amount of petroleum or diesel out of it. And ONGC, it is a sort of a mixed bag. It is more, ONGC is primarily in the Bombay High, around 50 to 100 kilometers outside the outside Bombay, middle of the sea. And then it has its, some of them are very good, but the wells which are quite old, the quality may be pretty bad. But nevertheless, after they are extracted, they are brought to the intermediary companies, which are midstream companies, where they are refined. So HPCL, BPCL, Bharat Petroleum Corporation Limited, Hindustan Petroleum Corporation Limited, for Hazira of, Ambani's, the Reliance Group's Hazira facility are the refineries where you actually break down the crude oil and take out the derivatives, right? And as I said, based on the quality, you get for the same quantity of crude oil, you'll get different quantities of downstream. Somewhere you get probably higher quantity of petroleum, somewhere higher quality of kerosene. Incidentally, all of you may know, but kerosene is actually much more valued than petroleum, but we get it much cheaper because it is subsidized. And then downstream, which you actually sell it to the end customers, the retail part. So HPCL, BPCL do refinery as well as they sell it. Reliance was previously into refining as well as selling. They have stopped, but there are certain companies in India, for example, if you look at shale gas, Shell in India is only into refining. They are not extracting or they are not refining. Shell petrol pumps, which you see. And if you could look at the power sector, again, you have three parts. One is the generation, transmission, and distribution. So generation is a NTPC or the state power companies. Transmission will be, the biggest transmission company is Power Grid Corporation of India Limited, PGCIL. And the distribution will be the likes of CESC, which also has some generation and transmission capacity. But many cases, there is in 2003, we have had these reforms in the electric sector where the generation, the transmission and distribution was divided. And there had been many companies which has been created only for last mile distribution, like, New Delhi Power Corporation, NDPL, right? So why I'm talking of this upstream, midstream and downstream, and why I'm talking of this generation, transmission and distribution, because when you discuss what is the impact, both from the market perspective as well as operation perspective, they will have some differences, based on where they belong. The next one, I wanted to just see some initial impact, which you all know. The utility sector have demand, which is the electricity and water sector. Demand has reduced, but not collapsed, because obviously household sector is consuming, people like you and me are consuming electricity and water. We also have, some amount of increase in the consumption in the household sector because we are at home all the time. But what has reduced significantly is the commercial consumption. And the drop in the commercial consumption has not been compensated by the increase in the household consumption. But it has not really become zero. Some of the industries, for example, we have discussed aviation, which has become zero. Utility sector, it has not happened that way. If you look at energy sector, there had been a steep decline because there is no passenger transport which is going on in the country. Whether you look at, the aviation is closed, passenger aviation is closed, railway, even the diesel is a small component of railway transport, but even there, whatever passenger traffic was there, that is gone, and intercity passenger transport is has gone down significantly. There is a little bit of drop in the freight transport also, because right now people are only transporting essential goods and not all sorts of goods. For example, automobile. You have seen that last month Maruti has sold zero automobile, zero. So, that, India manufactures some 8 million automobiles per year. So you can imagine the amount of transportation that happens carrying these, automobiles, the two-wheelers and four-wheelers across the country. So that is not happening. Like that, many other transport, interstate transport, intercity transport has stopped because of lack of economic activity. But the consumption of energy for the non-passenger sector, the freight sector, has not come down to zero. And if you look at the power sector, since the, I will see some numbers, but since the commercial consumption of power have reduced significantly, the power plants have started operating at a lower capacity, and there is a term called plant load factor. Typically, the plant load factors will be around 90% if the situation is good. We'll have PLFs of 90% plus for NTPC and the Nuclear Power Corporation, and hydel power plants. Hydel power plants, of course, operate all the time at a very high capacity because, water is coming constantly and power gets generated. But almost all of them have reduced their plant load factors. And wherever there is a gas is an input, like, in many special economic zones have their captive power plants, and large ones, sometimes, thousands of megawatts, 4,000 megawatts and all that. But many of them has gone for gas-based power plants, not just in SEZs, but SEZs are the ones who have adopted gas-based power much more than other. NTPC is largely coal, for example. National Hydropower Corporation is obviously water, but the ones which are outside the traditional power producers, the newer ones, many of them has gone for gas-based power plant. And now, because of the lack in demand, many of them has reduced the PLFs, and some of them has even closed down. So they are also, the consumption of gas also has reduced significantly. So if you look at the data of Gas Authority of India Limited, GAIL, which is responsible for transmitting gas from through the country, largely they are responsible, their numbers have fallen significantly. This is a sort of snapshot of, I'll not spend a lot of time here. If you look at, India has a capacity of gigawatt is 182,000 megawatts of power capacity, which is, which is a large number. But if you look at the per capita consumption of electricity in India is 1100 watts. If you look at a developed country, it is 11,000 to 12,000 watts. So we are actually consuming almost 1/10 of a developed country. Maybe people on this call are consuming much more, but the people below certain poverty line, certain income level, are not consuming enough. But of course, they are augmenting it with, burning some, tree leaves or wood or something like that, which is not getting captured here. But energy consumption as a country is very low. Energy production, given our population, is substantial right now. We have done a great job over the period of time in bridging the gap between the peak load and the energy requirement. It is almost zero now, which is a great thing. And that has primarily happened because we have augmented our renewable energy sources in last couple of years very, very fast. Especially solar power capacity across the country has gone up very fast. On the right side, you can see that the split between thermal, hydro, nuclear, and renewable energy, which is the wind energy and solar energy and tidal energy to some extent, which shows that the thermal power plants are still probably around 65 of the production. But this is steadily coming down because India is not adding to any thermal power capacity of late, for two reasons. One is pollution. The other is that quality of coal which we have in India is pretty poor. So we have to import a lot of coal, primarily from Australia, and that prices are going up. On the bottom left, I'm sorry for the small, the real estate was really not there, but, we are now contributing a significant amount of global, greenhouse gases, because even at 1100 watt per year, because of the population, our consumption is very high. And if you see our coal production, coal-based power plant is significant. I mean, if you compare with countries like, Germany, for example, who have completely gone on renewable energy 100% as a country, we still consume a lot of coal. But nevertheless, this is some good things that has happened. As I mentioned, one is that our renewable energies have increased. Second is our peak load has been bridged. Okay. Third is we have a very high potential of producing nuclear power, because we have cracked this technology of using thorium, which is not natural uranium. From natural uranium, you do enriched uranium, and that is how most of the countries in the world manage the nuclear power production. But we have thorium, which has we have got the technology and to produce, and literally, theoretically, we can actually have infinite supply of power if you really go the nuclear power way in a serious manner. I want to put this, some of these points here, because if you look at this energy, the mix which you have today, out of which, if you look at nuclear power, if you stock enough amount of nuclear fuel, you can generate electricity for a long time. So you are not very dependent on the supply chain. Hydro, again, once your dams are full, your hydel power will be produced irrespective of whether you have supply chain is on or off. Renewable energy, whether it is tidal wave, whether it is solar wave, whether it's wind energy, so tidal wave, solar energy or wind energy, again, you are not dependent. Once you put the infrastructure, the generation part is totally protected, right? And in a large way, the transmission also, because transmission is having no individual intervention. It just happens over thousands of kilometers. However, the thermal power plants depend a lot on the movement of coal. So if you are importing, you have to bring it to the, the port, and then you have to bring it to the power plants. Or if you are, using local coal, again, you have to take it from the coal pit and then bring it to the power plants. And normally, the storage, you will always hear that we have 2 days supply, 3 days supply, which means that the logistics has to be always be up and running. Now, so far, our railways have been able to manage, but if COVID, reaches a level where, railway is not able to move, or mining comes to total, mining is largely automated, but huge number of people work there. So far, we have not seen a collapse of mining across the country. But if it happens, our thermal power plants will be under great stress. So I just wanted to make sure that we get this point. Maybe as a post-COVID strategy, government will say that, let's increase this non-thermal power even faster than what we are doing today. The bottom, the left side is, of course, the percentage of global greenhouse gases. If you see, US is on the left, the pink, the blue is China, and third red is India. And if you look at the per capita consumption, India is much lower level compared to the China, North America, Europe, but we are higher than Africa and many other underdeveloped countries, and we are growing very fast in that. So that is one area of concern for, not from the perspective of how many watts we are consuming. We should, of course, consume much more to have a developed life, but what quality of power output we will be consuming. Sorry. And this is the same thing I have drawn on the oil and gas snapshot, same, source I have been using, and I have given the link for each of these industry segments is IBEF, which you can also refer. India's oil imports are very high. We import oil, almost $150 billion worth of oil is crude. Crude is imported. We don't import petroleum because we have large refinery capacity. As a matter of fact, I think the Hazira refinery capacity is the largest in the whole world. So what India does is we bring in crude and we refine it. And we refine so much that some of it we export back also. But our import bill of crude is very high. In fact, the amount of money we earn through our IT and ITS export is almost exactly the same amount as we pay for our import of crude oil, right? And that's a big vulnerability also. I just want to spend a little time here because we import a large part of our crude from Middle East, which is a very volatile area. It's expensive because we could not lay our pipeline through Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the amount which we are spending in import, if the prices go up, to right now, of course, prices have collapsed, and we'll see that. But if the prices, once upon a time, there was a situation that prices would have reached $200 per barrel, something like that. There was a threat. I remember 5-6 years back, India essentially can become a bankrupt nation, just because, or we have to completely cut down our internal transport. So very high level of vulnerability we have on the crude, so nothing much we can do about it except for going for energy resources which are non-crude, and that is where you increasingly see that we are saying we'll go for electric vehicles or we'll go for solar power and stuff like that, because we want to reduce this dependence. We are very lucky that we have huge reserve of natural gas, but our extraction has not been great because of various reasons, including some amount of confusion. There is some amount of corruption also probably there. So we are always in some sort of controversy as to how much we have and what should be the pricing, but we have significant amount of natural gas. Natural gas is not as easy to use as the petroleum or diesel, or to convert into energy, but we can look forward to using more of natural gas than crude going forward. So if you look at the value chain of oil and gas, if you go back and see the upstream, which is you are extracting it from the ground, it's almost automated. Very few people work there, and it is totally unaffected at this point of time. Refinery, again, we have very large refinery and very few people work there. For example, Hazira, there are some 800 people are working with a 25 million, I think, metric ton capacity, or maybe now 50 million, 2.5 million metric ton capacity. So it's huge facility with very few people. There is no issue. But they are all, right now the petrol pumps more or less are not operating, at least in the retail level. But as they open up, there will be a lot of challenges which will come up, both in terms of supply chain, bringing it from the refineries to the the retail outlets, which is the petrol pumps, and then selling it, how to maintain distance and stuff like that. The challenges will not be like other retail entity, because typically people are coming in a vehicle, whether two-wheeler, four-wheeler, but nevertheless that challenge will start now. But as in the case with electricity, which you have seen, same is utility sector, same is oil gas sector also, is largely not affected by the social distancing issue as many other industries, because large part of it is highly automated. But it is of course getting affected by the overall slowdown of the whole economy. This is the sort of oil prices, and of late there some interesting development happened. But I wanted to just put some trivia on the right side. We know that we always talk of this barrel. Now, what is a barrel? Barrel is nothing but 42 gallons of US gallons, and it came from the whiskey business. When they were trying to find out how to measure crude oil, US said, let's take whiskey barrels, which was 40 liters. And then they said, okay, let's add 2 liters for spillage while transporting, because they will be transporting over some sort of horse carriage or something like that. So they made it 42 gallons is 1 barrel, 159 liters. And that is the standard term which is used for measuring. And currently the price, I think, today, this is our 1st May, we are 5th May, it is $19. In between it went to zero, and there was a time where people were selling at a negative price. You have seen some few days back, they were saying minus $36, because there is oil sitting on tankers, but there is no takers, because there is no consumption, and everybody's strategic reserve And that is one term I forgot. Strategic reserve is a reserve which you keep to run your operations, especially in case of war when you are not able to get oil. So the largest strategic reserves in the whole world is maintained by US. India has some strategic reserves, but they are very small relatively, and they are all full across the world. So people were actually ready to pay money to unload their ship, because if the ships are running in the mid waters and the people and the fuel, the cost was so much, it was easy to give it unload the stock and pay some money even to the guy who is going to take it. But nobody is taking, because there is no place to keep them, and oil is something you just can't dump on the roadside, right, or on the high sea. So very peculiar scene, but recently it has sort of rebound, and the prices have reached $9-10. I think maybe today it's $15 or so. But I just wanted to bring this, that is a great news for India. From the import bill, possibly $150 billion import bill is suddenly shrink to $30 billion if this price point remains. So COVID has played a very good thing on our foreign exchange, from the foreign exchange perspective. But whether we should have come to this $19 through COVID is a question. I think the answer should not be yes. But nevertheless, it will ease our import burden for some more time, which is a good news. I just took this as it is making a lot of rounds in the internet, that there are so many tankers across the globe are stuck with oil, and they are not able to unload it, because first is that they are not able to park themselves in the nearest port because of lockdowns, and even if they come, there is no place to unload. So first one is a view of all the large ships and tankers and luxury cruises across the world. There is some indication, red dot is something, if you go through it, you will see red dots, which means they are sort of not moving, but anchored somewhere, and otherwise it will be showing some direction. And the second one is a filtered image, which has taken only the tankers. And, there is I understand that the oil at this point of time across the world in the tankers is 160 million barrels, which is 1.5 times, which is the normal, normal stock which you have on sea when the transportation happens. And this is the futures curve. It is, people are betting that, I will pay higher price of, today I will pay only maybe zero price almost for petrol, for crude. But if you give me in future, there is, as you go forward, the future prices are, people are taking a bet that, if you go to 2020, October, maybe situation will be far better. So I'll be paying you for, say, something like $53, right? So this is based on the outlook of how COVID will pan out, how the economy will come back. So what are the good things and bad things that has happened? As I said, of course, this industry, thankfully, because of upstream, midstream of oil sector is totally unaffected. Downstream will get affected, but not as the case of other retail segments, because here again, people will be coming in very small numbers. They will, of course, have some challenges in moving the, the petroleum and petroleum products across the country. But again, it is not like moving of people. It's a one driver, one support staff will be moving 20,000 liters, so their challenges is far lower, even in the retail part. If you look at in the electricity and utility sector, generation transmission is completely operating. In fact, there is no issue whatsoever. Even in the downstream, which is the transmission, the electricity companies are able to raise bill based on previous trends and, averaging it out, and electronics sending it out. So from the COVID disruption perspective, this segment is more or less protected. It is seeing a huge drop in demand, both on the electricity or the utility side and the energy side, because of overall slowdown of the whole economic activity. But there are a few good things have happened, as I mentioned, that, bill of the crude production bill has come down. Crude import bill has significantly come down, and it will stay even after COVID. For various other reasons, like there is some global price war is happening between OPEC on one side and Russia on the other side. And there is a huge reduction of pollution, which hopefully people will, at least remember when they talk about environment in future. In midterm, the thermal power plants will be facing some challenges, not from the price perspective, but logistic perspective for import and bringing coal to the power plants. In the energy and electricity retail side, you have to go physical at some time. You have to come and read the meters. You cannot go on generating it offline. And slowly, I think that the maintenance of this, especially all these facilities, whether you are extracting oil, whether you are transmitting electricity, whether you are generating electricity, there is a optimum level at which they should operate. It may be 70%, 90%, whatever. So if there is a prolonged period of under performance because of external reasons, many of them have to be shut down, and once shut down, it will take an enormous amount of time to bring them back on steam. Or if they continue to operate at a suboptimal level, the performance metrics will fall, it will affect them. And maybe at some point of time, all these challenges of getting spare parts and maintenance not being done and all that will start affecting the core capital asset itself. So I'll stop here and just give, as usual, like previous cases, some of the references which you can pick up about this particular segment. As I mentioned, it's a backbone of, apart from telecom, finance, oil and gas, and electricity is what runs the country. Of course, you have security and all. I'm not talking from the industry perspective. And it's a very interesting area to be in, very complex area, of course. And I'll take up sports entertainment in the next, hopefully tomorrow around the same time, 8 p.m. And for now, just stop here and, stop sharing and take some